Awesome. Oh, hey,
Hey, Mike.
Mike, just in time.
Perfect.
Cool. Welcome everybody to the September 7th Alpha Omega public meeting.
Wait, you have slides? I thought you were going to do slides today.
Oh, wait, even when I say don't do slides, I'll do a couple slides. I have a problem. So most of today is just going to be open discussion. So whatever you guys want to talk about is wonderful. We don't really have too much in the way of new content to talk about today because we're saving it all for next week's event in Dublin for Open SSF Day. So I hope if you are not there, you will at least be there virtually. It'll be on YouTube afterwards, and we hope the announcements we have to make then are as perceived as awesome as we think they are. So. Agenda for today.
Before you go further, just go back to the first slide, Michael. 1 second. We have a cool new logo. Do you like our cool new logo? We like our cool new logo. That's the only announcement I'm prepared to make today.
That's right.
But it's
yeah, it is good. So agenda, that's what we're going to talk about. So the level set, just for, has anybody, let's see, I see a few names that might not be super familiar with Alpha Omega. So at a super high level, purpose of this is, of Alpha Omega entirely is protect society by making sure that the open source that we all use is secure, but we do this directly by analyzing open source projects, working with maintainers, working with foundations and organizations that care and feed for critical open source projects. We're essentially putting money into solving the problem, which is Mike likes to say it is
turning money into security, $1 million at a time.
So what we really want is we want critical open source projects to be secure. We know that vulnerabilities will still exist, so we want them to be found and fixed quickly. On the Alpha side, this means scaled, impact. This is why we work with foundations and larger organizations. We target the most critical projects out there because we feel like, given a fixed amount of funding, we can do the most good by applying it judiciously in the right spots. It is still an experiment. We're not really sure, exactly what we're doing. Particularly, I think we've had some success, already here, but we're trying to figure out what the right place is to apply funding and what kind of engagement models really work. So I think you'll, continue to hear us saying the word experiment lots of times, which is the, we're trying things out and seeing what happens. So whereas Alpha is on the most, small number of most critical projects, e.g. like 100-ish. Omega is let's scan the top, say 10,000 using tools and automated tools and expert triage. The expert triage is really important to find critical vulnerabilities and get them fixed. So this is your team, or this is our team. So Michael and I were joined recently by Anna from Citi, who is being supported by Citi on a I hope a very long-term engagement, but it'll on the PM side. Of course, we have Brian, and then all the wonderful support staff at Linux Foundation and OpenSSF that helps us do what we do. So I think this is my last slide. At a glance, on the Alpha side, we have 3 active engagements. Right now, Node started, and Raphael, so awesome you're here. I don't want to put you on the spot. If you would like to talk about anything that's going on with Node, you are more than welcome to. If not, that's cool too, but I'm sure everybody would love to hear about any of that stuff.
Okay. So yeah, actually, in the middle of releasing Node.js, so sometimes my voice will freeze because compiling Node.js use 100% of my CPU, and then so basically what we are doing in the Node.js at the secured side is everything through that security working group. We have several good initiatives there. The big one is the one that I'm creating, that is the permission system, the permission model. It will enable users to restrict access to specific resources. Currently, we are in the middle of a good refactor, moving towards a better UX, because the initial proposal was basically, okay, if I want to deny access to a specific resource, I will send it in the CLI. But this is not secret first, right? The best way to solve it is like, I will restrict access to everything and only allow access to specific resources, specific operations. But that's like, actually that's difficult because if I do it, I will break the entire ecosystem, the entire Node.js. We are evaluating a few flags, a few approaches to use the security first approach, but also don't break everyone. And to use that approach, we're probably actually, and I'm working in every piece of Node.js, because it is also Node.js will need also reflect those informations, and there are many ways to bypass the security that I need to handle, So that's it, basically the permission system. And we are currently creating a threat model document, which is very important because recently we are receiving a lot of HackerOne reports, and some of them is like designed by Node.js, is expected, is not a security vulnerability, but it is not documented anywhere, so the security researchers can't find it easily. So we are creating a document that will say to developers and security researchers what can and cannot be considered a vulnerability in Node.js.
That's awesome.
That is really cool. Looking forward to it. Rafael, did you just say that you're building the next release of Node on your laptop? Are official Node builds coming from your laptop? And I say that with nothing but love and empathy for all the hell that this represents, but I'm actively curious now.
Actually, I will release the 18.9 that it aims to be released today, but the proposal got some the CI is breaking, and currently I'm Git bisecting all the commits, all the 93 commits, and finding the evil commit, and then I will drop it and make the proposal again and build everything and check if that's correct, and then send to the CI, because the CI takes too long and check other stuffs,
Makes sense.
Specifically I'm building at my laptop because the problem that we are facing is in the Linux perf, and I am the Linux user. I can fix it right now.
Makes perfect sense. Thanks for sharing that as well. It's always interesting to hear how people put things together.
Okay, no problem.
Awesome. Thank you. So it's awesome that Rafael, you could be here. And in future, I'm hoping to get folks from Python and Eclipse to kind of similarly give kind of quick updates on what's there, but also build that connection. So if now like who's actually doing the work that we're sponsoring. So we do have a couple engagements that we expect to be announced shortly. I really want to tell you about them, but we'll wait until next week. On the Omega side, we've I think it was 2 weeks ago or so, we released the Omega Analyzer. So this is the toolkit that we put together to basically orchestrate a bunch of static analysis tools, run it against a package, and gather and summarize the results and all that. The Omega Tracer was the Syscall tracer from a couple weeks before that. That one we're still trying to figure out what we really want to do with. But it was just a when you for that one, it was for Ubuntu packages specifically. When you install it, like what actually happens when you when you run a program. So you run Node or Python or LS or something, what system calls are actually generated during that, and then you can kind of query that and search it later on. We have found some vulnerabilities. I think we're up to 10 that we found, and I think 5 are fixed. And we published, and this is going back a couple months, we published about 90 or so automated security reviews. So these are NPM packages that we ran all the tools against, found nothing, and therefore there was really nothing to triage. And therefore we bundled that up and said that in a caveated way, it's safe because the tool had nothing to say about them. And that's it. That is all that I have. What would you all like to talk about?
Well, we had one question on the chat already somewhere. Do we have a ref for the Omega Tracer?
Yeah, I will.
And Michael, you can stop presenting, then we can just get the tiled view easily on that.
Perfect.
There you go. It's all on GitHub. Way to go, Michael.
There you go. And obviously, if it's useful, I'll not have it under my own GitHub account. So what do you guys think? So I guess to kind of throw some question feed out there, like
question bait.
Like, what should we be focused on? What should we do next? Like, is there a critical open source project that you're like, yeah, Node and Python and Eclipse are important, but this other thing is like way more important.
Why haven't you spent your money on this yet? Yeah.
Right. Or whatever.
Update on hiring. Yeah, I think we haven't hired anybody yet. We have definitely a few people in the pipeline that we're pretty keen about. So we're still, I am constantly reminded that even in not my day job, but my other day job, hiring takes up 120% of the time, and the pipeline is hard. So Jonathan, if you're volunteering, we accept. Come on in. The pay is dubious. The long-term career prospects are challenging, but the work is highly valued. Yeah, and great people, really great people.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, so a question for the group, since nobody has any questions, I'll start asking questions. We've largely been looking at major points of leverage right now through the foundations, in part actually, to sort of back to Jonathan's question, because of their ability to turn that money into people doing work. They had people on tap who they could add, they could hire somebody. When we worked with the Eclipse people, they had somebody, they were basically ready to make that person be a full-time person on that role. And so there was a shovel-ready aspect to that that's been a key driver to what we're doing. We don't just want to be moving money around from one foundation to the other and having it sit around waiting to be used. We've also worked with the critical projects working group to get the list of top projects that ultimately we'll start focusing on in various ways. We've had a couple of conversations with other industry associations where the list of top projects for a particular industry segment is different than what you'd have as sort of the top list. And we're thinking about working with those associations to fund and drive changes in a more focused way. And I'd love to hear what people think about that. Including stunned silence.
Vicky.
Oh, hi. Yeah. So I think that it could be very interesting to have, for instance, Alpha Omega working group type things that are um, focused on verticals. So for instance, the verticals that will have the largest impact to the world at large, like financial services, power, infrastructure, things like that. I'm wondering, and I'm sensitive to the fact that you're in an awkward position because you're going to have big announcements next week, and maybe some of this is already in play and you can't talk about it. I don't know, but what sort of verticals are you specifically considering right now? What's on your short list, I guess?
So you mentioned financial services. That is definitely on my list. I think that as a Canadian living in the United States, healthcare is always on my mind. And I actually did software work, like I did a bunch of startups and consulting in startups in the sort of healthcare software space. And what I learned there made me very interested in solving this problem. So I think that healthcare, like the thing I worry about the most on healthcare actually is that it wanders very quickly into that messy space of IoT, where the S is for security. And, you know, I don't think we actually know enough how to solve that problem space. And, you know, I want to make sure we stay focused on things that are tractable. And so, like, I'd love to help fix healthcare. I don't know that it's actionable right now. Whereas I feel like financial services, I understand a bit better. I don't know anything about the power space and utility space. That would be an interesting area. Well, I don't know how much open source there is in those verticals.
I mean, a fair bit. There's an entire foundation under the Linux Foundation just for, you know, it's like Open Power or some, you know, clever name like that, right? Or LF Energy, I think. I think it could be interesting for the Alpha Omega team to poll your respective companies that have very large areas that they work in there, and try and bring in a couple of folks just for a brainstorming session. Like if we were to focus on one of these areas we're less familiar with, like IoT writ large, and then focus smaller on IoT in automotive, IoT in healthcare, IoT in satellites, IoT in, you know, that sort of thing. I think that could be
trying really hard to avoid the IoT space here, Vicky, and you're dragging me back.
I know. Well, I'm just thinking of the greater, you know, world good. What's going to impact a lot of people outside of open source software? What's going to protect the most people in the biggest way? And that's going to be really, you know, financial services, whatever. Everyone's talking about financial services because there's, for some reason, a lot of money in it. So we focus on it a lot. But there's, but you're also going to have the power and, you know, automotive and these things that really impact day-to-day regular human beings, right? I will defer to our friend Minimore.
Hey, yeah, so just to give you a quick update on what another discussion that we're having on the side. So Michael had this idea of like bringing in the open, Michael Scovera had this idea of bringing in the open source maintainers and basically like having a dialogue with them. So a few of us were trying to coordinate about a virtual event sometime near future on that specific thing. So we had our first meeting yesterday, and we were discussing about like what's the scope, like who would be the attendees. And one of the things that the obvious thing was we can focus on different programming languages because people who develop in certain programming languages have specific concerns. But then we were also looking into the tiers, like what are the top projects in a certain programming language, but then we also want to be representative of the different tiers, like the tier 0, 1, 2, 3 that are being identified by other open source things. We also were discussing about the verticals. So that's, I mean, and I think like there maybe not on the first one, but if we like plan to have this thing in a, like if we create a model where this can be executed in a regular fashion, then it might be actually judicious to have a subsequent one where we can focus on a specific area like a healthcare or and know about the pain points. I mean, personally, I'm curious to find out I mean, to me, bugs are bugs, but are there specific bugs that are of specific concern for healthcare that are not necessarily concerned for financial or otherwise?
To your last point, I think it's less about bugs and more about packages, right? So like everything has bugs, as you correctly point out, right? The source code has bugs, and so there are generic scanning tools that can find things at scale, and that's what Omega needs to find, right?
Yes.
This is more about an alpha level engagement. We can go in and say, and this is where it gets interesting, right? Is that you talked about the language ecosystems or the package ecosystems. Those represent super broad leverage points of engagement where we can go off and generally toughen up and harden their infrastructure or their solution spaces in some powerful ways. When you wander into the verticals, you then end up with a menu of packages. And so then it's a question of like building an engagement with, you know, a small set, or maybe even getting these folks together in a room and saying, hey, you've just been identified as a lucky prize contestant on the Bug is Right competition. Now we're going to have a conversation. How can we help you? How can we collectively pull things like that together? Because, you know, these projects, typically the maintainers are already pretty feeling overloaded with everybody else telling them what to do as it is. How do we build an engagement there that makes them feel supported, actually helps improve things? You know, that's part of the conversation. So
I think there's another dimension here, which is the areas that we're focused on right now are clearly in the open source domain. Like there's, you know, it's just open source. As you go into like, let's say healthcare, how much what's the Venn diagram of for all of healthcare software? How much of that is commercial? How much of that is actually true open source? And do we want to lean into the edges of the open source Venn diagram there? I don't know the answer. Maybe it's all open source and I'm just ignorant of it, but I think that might be an interesting point where we run into things where like the only folks to talk about are commercial entities that like this is their business is selling this thing, and they kind of either don't want or don't need our kind of interference in their business model.
Well, even if they are, you know, that is their business selling this thing, that thing runs software, that software runs open source. It just does, right? And so they should, she says, intentionally judgmentally, be concerned about the security of their devices, if only from a monetary business model point of view. So whether they're willing to go on the record as saying, yes, we are having conversations with Alpha, Omega, and the Michaels around the software that we run, they should certainly be willing to have conversations with you if there is an organization that's going to be out there working to secure the software that they are using and doing it not by using up their OpEx, right? So I think that's something that they should at least be having conversations and being able to say, hi, I'm from Google, we want to talk to you. Hi, I'm from Microsoft, we want to talk to you.
I think
there's a lot of power in that, right?
This is where the industry associations are super helpful. So
yeah, exactly.
Without naming names, right? Either in a vertical or members of the vertical, right? These large organizations that consume large amounts of open source have a default policy of let's not tell the world what we use because that's just painting a target on our back, right? It's not even unreasonable. It's entirely rational thinking. But having an aggregator of some industry association or a working group or whatever. So imagine if, let's say that there is nobody stepping up from, I'll pick one, automotive IoT. Great. If there was a sub-working group of automotive IoT folks start identifying what the common things were because we got members from various places that do something like that, great. Now we now have an anecdotally relevant set of things to go off and think about and talk about, and we should start engaging with those in a way that allows the various vertical members and participants to still sort of not have a target paint on their back in terms of, we totally depend upon this package that everybody knows is a steaming pile of bugs. Please don't insert your USB drive into your car tomorrow. You know.
Yeah, I do a lot of work with FinOS, the Financial Services Open Source Foundation, including lead their open source readiness working group. And even in a Chatham House rules completely non-recorded sort of situation, we have a very difficult time getting people to talk about what they're running and how. So I'm very aware of and sympathetic to the challenges that you will have there. But I think you totally nailed it, going to them, meeting them where they are in their space, where they feel most comfortable, rather than asking them to come to you. That's going to get you the best results. And even if it's just an exploratory conversation, I think that can be really helpful for Alpha Omega to figure out what its priorities will be going forward as it starts to, really knock down these larger issues such as, Python and Node and the like.
Yep. So Vicky, I take two things out of this. One is, you're right that we should talk to our own internal vertical folks who are probably connected into various places and start seeing what they have to say. I like that one. We will take an action item on that. And we, I think, are reasonably well connected to the financial services verticals already. Not actually through Finos, but there are at least, because there's always at least one or two of these organizations. We can certainly engage with both. If anybody on this call, or you know of somebody who has a meaningful presence in some other industry vertical, ISAC or whatever, we would love intros, right? We're happy to have these conversations and start teeing those up. And as you say, Vicky, it's like just showing up and having a conversation and getting to know them and sort of building trust one day at a time. It'll take time to do that. So let's get that long pole started now.
Yeah, that's, I don't currently have those contacts. I may have some externally and just, my brain is not with it. But I do know that Wipro has a number of people who are embedded in those spaces. Eric may have more information on that. He's been at Wipro far longer than I have, and has a lot more contacts across the organization to know, where they're focusing. I know
Right.
we have a very strong healthcare practice. And so we will have a number of people who can have some information for you there. So
And
maybe
the offer
Eric
doesn't,
can have that.
the offer does not expire. So we're keen to do
No, man, come
whenever it
on.
comes.
Yeah, certainly.
Eric Houston.
Yeah, it's a question versus consumer health versus pharma versus other areas of medical. We all across the board, we have quite a bit of a presence, so we can certainly talk to those practices and see.
Cool. Of course, there are multiple segments of health, because why wouldn't there be? Hey, speaking completely randomly, did anybody see that post yesterday about the insurance industry publishing trillions of prices?
It's like 90 terabytes or 900 terabytes. It's just like
The
everything.
the word that you're looking for, there's a you have all these little numbering schemes, right? There's a stupid byte. It's a stupid byte, right? Because at some point you just you can't reason about it sensibly anymore.
I did see that. I'm really looking forward to analysis.
I think we found the new canonical definition of big data.
That or what would the term you'd use, like aggressive non-compliance? And with apologies to anybody who works in the insurance industry, which I'm sure is its own set of challenges in its own right. But wow, that is what a web we have tangled.
We've also worked out where all the hard drives have gone.
Yeah. Oh man. Yep. All right. Well, that was productive conversation. Appreciate it. Always open for more on that. Any other topics of thought? And again, just encouraging people to be as provocative or entertaining as you choose.
This is being recorded. No one's going to be that provocative. Sorry, Michael.
I would. I already did. I talked about
You
insurance.
already did.
I'm just trying to set the tone.
Speaking as a Canadian in America,
Yeah.
that really is walking up on fire right there.
Yep. I try to stay factual. So I'll ask another question then. If we think about Alpha, we have a list of projects we can go and talk to. We've got the top N, right? Unsurprisingly, the top N projects have relatively few sort of 0 days lying around waiting for somebody to fix it, and have a fair amount of attention on them. And so is this one of those things where it's not the fat head or the long tail, but the sort of medium torso where, you know, should we move down the list and find the second 100 most important projects that are probably not quite getting the star attention that the others are? Is there a phenomenon there of like, when you're at the top things, then all the attention is there, but turns out that it's not the super obscure package in the XKCD diagram, but it's something sort of somewhere in the middle that everybody kind of uses and, you know, doesn't pay much attention to right now. Like, and again, just looking for anecdotal thoughts here that we will then turn into a conversation to see what happens.
So y'all have some scripts that you run, some and the like, right? You have some automation set up for this sort of
Yep.
Security testing. Could you pick a random 100 further down the stack, run the scripts, see what happens, right? I mean,
Do we-
I think it could
I
be
think we
really
do that.
interesting.
We kind of do that
Mm.
already. That's what Omega is about automation at scale. What I'm talking about is a more alpha-like engagement, which right now, you know, given that we don't have a full-time security researcher, involves us saying, hey, if we gave you money, how would you turn that money into security for your foundation project or whatever? And usually the answer has been pretty crisp, like, we'll do this, this, and this, and this. And like, great, here's some money, go do those things. And so I'm imagining some, you know, not quite loved enough project that would say, oh, well, we would hire somebody to do like these 3 things to go off and security out on this project, fix our build infrastructure because damn, and, you know, then go off and like, you know, sponsor a whole bunch of bug fixes that we have that are holding us back or whatever. And, you know, and I'm just imagining what a sort of per project engagement might look like, where it's not quite the foundation. They don't have all the sort of infrastructure and resources around it. So, you know, again, I'm just speculating as to what it might look like when we start playing down at this level. And it's in many ways connected back to the verticals, because once we get to the verticals, the action is going to tend to play out more in terms of an individual project and a group of, you know, loosely coupled maintainers rather than a foundation and hiring infrastructure.
And I think that that's a really interesting question, but there's a meta question even before that, which is locating those things, right? You talked about the fat head and the skinny tail, and you know what's in the middle. And that's kind of where I was going with my thoughts. Like, how can you identify things in that middle? And so, what if you were to take like 100 from the middle? Not at the very start, not at the very end. Pick it like
Random.
around, yeah,
100.
603 to 703 on the list.
Yep.
Pick that, or something like that, and then just run whatever existing tests you have on it, just to see what it turns up. And is there something that, you know, is there a snake hiding in that grass? And is that snake venomous? Can
Right.
you see whether there is something in there? And just, you know, spot check. It doesn't even have to be 100, 50, 10, doesn't matter.
Yep.
And that tests the whatever you already have for your automation, sees how it's working, right? You can iterate on that to help inform things for Omega going down, but also you can spot some of these things that you can then turn into proofs of concept. All right, your project that has like 5 maintainers, but has a ton of dependencies, you became a tall poppy, to start using lots of different metaphors. You stuck your head up above the grass in whatever way. Let's start talking to you, and let's proof of concept. And what would you do with money?
So we're really talking about, like, what I'm hearing out of this is like a risk score, which is being different than a criticality score. And maybe the risk score is criticality times scorecard times
Dependency graph from dev or something.
Yeah, and then some sort of a function. You throw all these things in a pot, you stew it around for a while, and you get a number, and then you kind of see on the scale of most critical to 100,000 out, whether that graph looks like this, or is just kind of randomly choppy, or there is actually a bubble kind of in the middle.
That could be.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, but risk score is kind of a holy grail. It's
Well,
going to
the
be a
nice
hard
thing is
thing.
everybody can just say, oh, this is a risk score, and like they're all right.
Yeah,
Marketing.
Yes.
Well, I think so. I'm going to just simplify this all down to like So Michael, today with the Omega tool chain, right? When you run it and like, how fast does it process? Like, how many projects per day can you run?
It's just compute. It doesn't matter, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So I think that there's sort of an Omega-like effort where we sort of just pick projects further down the list and apply the tooling and what Vicky was suggesting. I think there's also a sort of random sampling of projects from some list, and then an equally arbitrary but sort of pseudoscientific criticality weight risk number to kind of see what pops up that. And there's a whole bunch of then different experiments that come out of that. One which is, well, let's go look at it by hand. Well, who's going to do the looking? This is where the interesting problem is. Right now, all of the actual work that gets done in Alpha Omega that isn't making deals, logistically speaking, and generally wasting hot air, right, is Michael, the other Michael. You know, and we're about to buy Michael a spiffy new workstation laptop because security. When I sort of, if we did that random sampling as a sort of exploratory thing, the experiment in my mind now is like, well, what is it even like to go and approach a single project and say, we did a couple of things for you, we got some conversations, right? There's an experiment to learn there because we're going to want to have some muscle around what a per project engagement looks like, either in terms of like us doing research on them or us giving them money or whatever. And then connecting this to sos.dev as well, where we start to promote, hey, project of the month. We'd love to see fixes and bugs and everything on this project of the month. And we do so with their willing consent, because the last thing anybody wants to do is to have a target pin on their back without them knowing about it. But, you know, and we probably would do it by actually having funded them beforehand so they have the resources to handle whatever. There's a whole pattern here.
Exactly.
I'm obviously just making this stuff up as I think about it right now, but I like the way it's coming together. So,
And a lot of this, you know, I was in the vulnerability disclosures working group call earlier today. And we're finishing up the CVD guide for researchers. Essentially, you are a researcher, you found something in an open source project, you have no idea what the heck to do with open source projects. Here's how you can approach it, right? Or I'm somebody who uses open source, I found a bug, how can I, it's a security thing, how can I do the right thing, right? And so they're finishing that up so it can be done for next week, like everyone else. Yay, hurrah, next week, all this stuff. But this is kind of even the step before that, right? How do you haven't even found the projects, the security yet, the bugs, to disclose them. You just want to approach the project to say, hey, we're going to be doing this. We might put a target on your back. Let's work on this together so I can be a shield and you don't actually get hit, right? How do you start that conversation? And that's something that I think working with the best practices working group to, once you collect some data, have them write it up. So it can then get publicized. So more people can actually do the right thing in the right way, rather than doing like, what is it, Hacktoberfest? Hey, everybody go out there and contribute to open source sort of crap, which is fixed. And, you know, DO learned from that, but.
So turning it around to the relatively small audience of people here today, how many of you are a maintainer of a project that, you know, like, can we start with home? Like, how many of you are a maintainer on a project where we could come and say, let's start talking to you, not as a happy welcome guest at our monthly conversation here, but as the maintainer of a project or one of the maintainers, and start building engagement? Because we, you know, starting close to home to practice this and learn it before we go to some random person and go, hey, I'm Michael, and this is Michael, and we're Michael and Michael, and it's going to be great. We're here with money, and it's going to be fantastic. And they're going to go, yeah, really? Go on. So is anybody on this?
Raphael isn't allowed to answer.
Yeah, Raphael is exempt from that because, you know, obvious reasons. Not the least of which is because he's compiling Node on his laptop right now.
And running Zoom. It's obviously not running Teams.
Oh,
sorry.
Oh, man.
Actually, I'm trying to set up Windows 2020 actually 2020 machine to debug something very weird. So it's even worse, I guess. I mean, because
We may need to get Raphael some hardware too while we're at it.
not just because of it, because building Node.js is
Yeah.
very difficult in
no.
your machine, but your virtual machine is even worse,
Good times.
So Randall's in Gentoo, so maybe he has some thoughts
Yeah, I
about.
was also thinking with Homebrew, there might be some, because Homebrew's GitHub, so there's definitely some conversations I can have with a lot of people, because I'm involved with a lot of projects.
Well, so Randall, very much like with open arms, if you don't mind starting some of those conversations and literally just ping us and say, yep, this would be a great place to start that conversation. We'll show up.
I know Gentoo wants to work with you guys, but I know they have strong opinions about all of OpenSSF, and knowing Gentoo and knowing their history of Holy Wars, they have no problem starting Holy Wars. They start it every day. We're having one right now about Chrome and Firefox.
Yeah, we don't really not the first time I've heard words like that.
Because that they were like the security team over there was put together by GR Security, and they were they had a lot to do with the GR Security patches. So after they left, we don't have a leader, so it's kind of everyone does their own thing. So yeah, but I do know of it doesn't have to be Gentoo. It's just I do know of a lot of other projects that I will start a conversation. I'll keep you guys informed because I do travel quite a bit.
Awesome.
We'd enjoy it. We'd appreciate it. Let's not pick something where we're going to step into either a Holy War factory or an existing Holy War as our first type of.
I will say this, that there are, because Jason, I don't know if you guys know Jason Donafield from WireGuard, but he's one of the guys in Gentoo security team. And I mean, they have very valid input. It's just that, yeah, I think it's one of those measure.
Super keen to have that kind of input. I just don't want it to get tangled up into foundation to foundation politics between OpenSSF, LF, Apache, and name other foundations you want.
Yeah.
But that's not the conversation I'm looking to have. So, but if an organization says, you know what, yeah, we disagree on these fronts here, but there's a tactical point where we'd like to sit down.
Homebrew would probably, Mike McQuaid from Homebrew would be a good person to approach because he's a GitHub employee. He's the guy that runs Homebrew, and Homebrew is kind of supposed to be this agnostic thing. So I can start a conversation with Mike and see if there's some medium there. And I also can start it with Sam, who's the de facto leader of Gentoo, and at least I can put you guys in touch with him. He also runs security because he kind of runs everything. So at least we could start small, but him and John Hermit, I don't know how to say his name. Ajax is what we call him.
Sounds good. And I'll happily endure all the digs around us not hiring the Brew maintainer, although everybody uses it. That's just the de facto starting point of any conversation around Brew with Google. So I'll take the heat there.
All right. Right on. But yeah, and then I do have a lot of JS stuff and whatnot, but I think it's better to start with something that's maybe not too JS because they have opinions. I've talked to V and I'm part of Astro, and they just don't understand security is the bottom line.
Perfect. Love those kinds of people.
Yeah, because I was part of the NPM best practices thing, just so you guys have a little bit of background. And I was talking to Fred and Veetan because NPM was telling me you got to talk to these people because build tools are getting targeted, and they were like, "No, we're doing everything React is doing, so we should be good."
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds party-ish. Wait 1 second.
So go back to the conversation, the N-1 conversation on, can we find this middle thing? I was just thinking, if we have all of this data, wouldn't it be really cool? One of the holy grails I would like to see out of this is a predictive model of future vulnerabilities, because we have a lot of history. And we can run this stuff over time and come up with, you know, I mean, this is kind of what ML is for, coming up with a way to predict, what is the likelihood that given a project in its current state will have a vulnerability at some time in the next year, and what would the severity and all that be of this, based on everything from static analysis over time to maintainers. So I don't know that there may not be a signal there to find, but if there is a signal to find, I think it would be kind of interesting to find that.
But that's the same thing as the risk score, right? Like if you know the risk score, then you pretty much know the likelihood that bugs are going to happen.
Yes, but the question is, how do you know that the risk score was correct?
Right.
But yeah, so if you
Validating the
calculate that score over time and you saw that it correlated with vulnerabilities,
Yeah,
spread,
that would be pretty sweet.
yeah. That sounds like a full-time role for a while, though. So
Yeah.
that's something we can bite off right now. But actually, we've been, every once in a while we get some academics coming into some of the working groups, and they want to help, and they have a project that they like to lead. I wonder if that one would be one that we could kind of elevate and put out there in case anybody's interested, because it would be a pretty newsworthy thing if there's anything came out of it.
All right, I have one more provocative topic. It's a bugaboo of mine. I feel like the common infrastructure and tooling for essentially the workflows of vulnerability reporting, vulnerability management as a maintainer, there's a lot of industry tooling for finding the list of vulnerabilities that have been reported about after some software composition analysis of whatever your random stuff is in a container or a VM or whatever. But if you think about, the life cycle of a world of researchers and individuals and people finding problems, potentially zero-day issues, and then a world of package maintainers having to consume reports, right? And everybody's essentially inventing their own ad hoc workflow for doing that, with varying degrees of security around it and varying degrees of, transparency or visibility into the whole system that we could all leverage. And so I just keep coming back to this thought of like, if we had common tooling, possibly just sitting on top of a GitHub repo as it's, on top of GitHub repos or any Git repo as its sort of backing store, but one that allowed sort of, communication across these different players and roles in ways that were secure, that allowed you to have clarity around what you're sharing with whom, and possibly even generating useful aggregate metrics about just how much information is flowing throughout the whole ecosystem. This just feels like an opportunity that we have not tapped into yet. And I'd love to hear what people think. And if what I said made no sense, I'm happy to explain it again or try a different way.
I guess I'm not sure if I'm getting it. Like for individual projects, there's an issue tracker, and hopefully everything flows through there. Maybe you're talking more about like information flow between projects.
GitHub issues are public, and so the whole how do you privately disclose an issue is still
It's still ad hoc.
I mean, one model is to create your own repo and you create a security advisory, and then you give the other project access to it so that you guys can have a private comment stream, but it's a private project. Another one is to like find their email address and just email them, HackerOne.
Okay, but everybody's figuring this out for themselves.
And there's no clear winner in this.
Yeah,
that we've seen, and that's kind of unfortunate. The GitHub security advisories is very much about you, the project maintainer, have a place to do this stuff yourself, but that initial reporting. So I think another model that you could use is you open up a public issue to the maintainer and say, hey, I found a security issue. Could you open up a draft security advisory, invite me to it, and then I will dump my stuff into it. But it just seems like kind of fact machines.
Actually, the security advisors, I have fixed a couple of security vulnerabilities in Node.js and Diche. And we are in that project, we are using the GitHub security advisor, and that's working very good, at least.
How do you get the issues in from the, are these issues that you found yourself, or is this stuff that folks from the outside have given?
No, from outside.
So how do they contact you, like, initially? Like, how do they?
Actually, I don't have admin permissions to that people. What normally happens is that the reporter send somehow an issue, or it might be a HackerOne report. I don't know,
I think it is HackerOne, yeah.
honestly. But what happens is that Matthew, one of the admin maintainers, invites me to that report and invite the reporter, so I can work in the project, apply my patch, and then the reporter can also review and test by themselves. So I think that iteration, like the problem with HackerOne, I understand, is that the reporter just report, but don't have like a straight progress and don't see what is changing, what is changing actually in the code, and what happens basically when we receive a HackerOne report in Node.js. We apply the patch and say, okay, the patch is on the way, and you just need to wait, and then that's it. But it might happen that in the next release, the same bug happens because we don't thought about something that the security research has an idea, you know. For instance, the last Node.js security release missed one line, and that line is make the vulnerability is still active for some reason. And that's the lack of HackerOne, in my opinion. And this lack, I think the security advisor would solve.
So I think this is sort of all speaking to, like, even just writing down what we think the right workflows, and thinking about it from the product manager of me just wants to like have a clear sense of like requirements and workflows, and then recommended practices. We don't even need to be tooling to start, as long as we have, this is the playbook. Because right now, everybody can evolve their own playbook, and it may seem really good to them in that context, but in the broader context of a lot of projects, a lot of people, a lot of, you know, consumers and publishers and finders and whatever like that, it's messy. And instinctively, it just feels like there's an opportunity here to do something interesting.
So is this what the vulnerability disclosures working group is working on?
Well, that is a question.
It sounded to me like they were approaching it from both angles, both from the I'm a maintainer, how do I do this? Like, tell me everything I need to know, but also I'm a security researcher. Tell me everything I need to know.
That is correct.
But at the same time, like I apologize, I haven't read the draft of this yet, but like, does that recommend specific tooling, or is it more about the process? So if it's just you should contact them privately, and you should look for their email address in here, here, and here, or if you can't find
Actually, I could actually respond to that. We actually try to specifically stay away from mentioning tooling, because as soon as we got into tooling, it turned into a huge discussion. So we specifically try to stay away from tooling. Even we had examples in there, and then it's just it really does turn into a whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, well, we are approaching the end of our scheduled time. I'm going to stop asking my own questions. Thanks everybody for coming today. It's always great to hear different points of view and perspectives. It helps us in so many ways. Really appreciate it. Tell a friend, come to the next one. Looking forward to more conversations, and watch this space for announcements next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Let's see if I can just stay on. Sebastian, if you stay on, please. All right, Sebastian, we're here alone.
Thank you. It's just, going to go into recording. I mean,
Oh,
I'm not
I
sure.
don't know how to stop the recording. Let me see if I can. I have no way to stop the recording. Okay, then we're not going to do that. I will, let me get the email address right for your, but why, oh, I missed an S, I think. Hang on one second. Just gonna make sure I got it right. Yeah, I missed an S. Give me 1 sec. All right, invite sent. Tell me when you got it, and then we'll just close the call.
Okie dokie, refreshing my email. My email service provider doesn't like just quite how many emails I have in my inbox.
I'm sorry for that. I might be able to paste it in, but
Yeah,
you could-
I've just created an account on the OpenSSF Slack, so I wonder
Oh.
if that'd be easier.
I can paste the link on that.
Mhm.
Let me DM you the link. Hang on. It's all made more complicated by the fact that I don't. I'm using an iPad for my Zoom calls because my primary conferencing setup does not. There you go.
All right, I see.
All right, I'm pinging you the link directly here. Should have that.
Okie dokie, see you on that link. I've got it.
Right. Bye.
Bye.